네, 스페이스K에서는 2021년 첫 번째 전시로 세계적인 작가 헤르난 바스의 개인전을 준비했습니다. 모험, 나의 선택이라는 주제의 이번 전시는 한 소년이 성장하면서 겪는 우울감과 모험, 다양한 고독감 이런 것들을 작품으로 표현하고 있고요. 작가는 음악이나 영화, 소설이나 여러 장르를 통해서 본인이 받은 영감을 자신만의 회화적 내러티브로 작품에 담고 있습니다. 그리고 이 작가가 태어난 곳이 마이애미이고 작업을 했던 곳이 디트로이트기도 해서 굉장히 미국적인 풍경도 회화에 잘 녹아져 있는 것이 특징입니다.
Hi, good afternoon. You have to forgive me, this is the first time I've done an interview by myself, technically, but I'll try my best and see how it goes. First off, I wanted to thank SpaceK for giving me the opportunity to exhibit my work in Korea for, I guess it's the third time in recent years. Nothing like this, though, nothing like a major survey that they're providing me. So special thanks to them. The show is really exciting for me. I really love Korea. It's one of my favorite places. I've been able to visit quite a few times. So I'm honored to be able to show there and have the public have a greater opportunity to see the work. So I have a few questions I'm assuming the curators sent over for me to discuss. The first was how the book series Choose Your Own Adventure, which is the title of the exhibition, how that came to be and how that plays into my work. Choose Your Own Adventure books were a series of books made a couple of decades ago. I think it was in the 80s they were created. But the basic premise was that children would pick up these books and as they're reading, they would end a chapter and the book would give you an option, A, B, or C, which way would you like the story to go? And you would then turn to that page to see how your story would continue. For example, you'd be fighting a dragon and to the end of the paragraph it would be, do you run and hide? Do you go through the cave? Do you blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So for me, I love the idea of those books and I did read them as a child as well. And what they offered me was an opportunity for a narrative to be open-ended, which is something a lot of my work focuses on. I always like to say that my work happens, when you're looking at the painting, they happen as if you're watching an intermission. They are the moment right after intermission in a play, for example. It's that heightened moment when everything comes to fruition and you don't really know exactly what's going to happen within the next 10 minutes of whatever's happening in that painting, if that makes any sense. So Choose Your Own Adventure is sort of a way of relating that to the audience viewing these works, in that they can walk up to these paintings and walk away from it, creating their own idea, creating their own adventure, creating their own mythology as to what's going to happen to this character next. So that's sort of where the whole idea of choosing your own adventure comes into play within my work. And also just a fun title sometimes. It's fun to just be fun about that. And the newest works in the show are all sort of nautically based, and it was something that happened just sort of fluidly. I had just finished two major series of works over the last year or so. And whenever I finish a big body of work that's sort of under one theme, I always kind of like to take a break and make individual works that sort of have nothing to do with any particular theme. But on occasion, sometimes those themes come about just from making these one-off, as I call them, paintings. So with these works, I sort of just started with a very simple idea of wanting to paint the rain, which is a very simple idea, but as I came to develop these sort of ideas behind them, I started thinking about The Old Man and the Sea with the famous Hemingway novel. And I like that it related to me personally, seeing as though Hemingway's book takes place in the same waters that my parents crossed to get here from Cuba decades ago. So I had that sort of personal relationship to it, and also just being from Florida as well, and Cuban, and the whole mythology of that. But so in my version of The Old Man and the Sea, I turned it into the young man in the sea. And it's sort of a revenge, in a sense, for the character in Hemingway's novel, where famously the fisherman catches this giant marlin, and after fighting for days, he straps it to his boat and attempts to drag it to shore, only to be eaten by sharks all along the way home. So in my version, the young fisherman has triumphantly caught a shark and is taking that home sort of as a trophy, a bit of revenge for the old man in the sea. And the boat, if you notice in the painting, has the SS Manolin written on it. And Manolin is actually the young man who was supposed to escort the old man in the sea on his journey and was not allowed to by his parents. So I kind of nicknamed the boat after that character from the Hemingway novel. But other than that, the newer works, it just sort of, that one painting inspired the remaining ones with that sort of sense of going out. I guess this goes back to choose your own adventure. Like when you set out to sea, it's sort of, you're going into this deep abyss. To me, the ocean is much more frightening than space or anything else. I have kind of a little bit of a fear of the ocean, to be honest, which is strange considering I live in Florida. But yeah, it's a series of works that for me really relate to like me growing up, me being from where I am, and on top of that, the new wallpaper series, which I made specifically for this show, was inspired by end papers used in the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys series, which was another children's book series, very popular in the U.S. Early on, starting in the 50s, I think. And these end papers, the end papers are basically the when you open a book, the 2 pages that introduce you to what's going on. They are in the original Hardy Boys series. The end papers have all these different vignettes that are basically drawn from all the different covers of the different books in the series. It's sort of like in a way a retrospective of all of their adventures, which I really loved. So I wanted to make my own version, but have it be specific to these adventures at sea. So it's populated by sea monsters and boys again on boats, and also mystical creatures like narwhals, and also boys pretending to be monsters with shark fins strapped to their back, or in one case pretending to be the Loch Ness Monster as well. So it's something I really liked developing, and I'm really happy with how it turned out within the space. And also it's something I feel like can continue to make in the future, and imagine having sort of my own retrospective wallpaper, in a sense, where I can add these different vignettes all together in 10 or 20 years and create a massive wallpaper of dozens and dozens and dozens of these different vignettes, which is something I definitely want to consider doing further on in the future. The next question was about how COVID has sort of affected me and the art world. And luckily for me, it's hasn't changed all that much for me in terms of my work and how I function on a daily basis. I don't have any assistants in the studio. I work completely by myself all the time. So for me, it was lockdown basically meant going back, going about my daily business, which is waking up in the morning and going to work and working by myself all day and going right back to work. The only real big difference for me was noticing the different things that happened within my neighborhood, and like the quiet of it all was really kind of shocking. And especially during those few weeks of lockdown quarantine, it was cliche to say that, but it really was odd to see how much nature was coming back so quickly. Like there were birds that I only find in the Everglades here, roosting on the rooftop of the studio, which was kind of amazing to see. But I don't know that, I guess COVID in one way reminded me that a lot of the characters I work with, in a sense, are already people that have been in their own personal lockdown, I guess you could say, for a really long time. They're introspective characters. They're people who would already be in their basement, regardless of whether the government told you had to stay home. So I think a lot of the characters I played with in the last couple of years have had that sort of isolation built into them, in a sense. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's definitely something that's been brought more to my attention as a result of COVID, that these sort of introspective characters are something I've been drawn to for a really long time, and I think, if anything, my characters would be thriving at this time, oddly enough. So the next question was about how I define what adult means to me, considering the subject matter or the characters in my work seem to be typically on the younger side, which I think is accurate, but not exactly accurate for when I think about the characters. I always think of them as being not necessarily adolescent, but on that verge of adolescence to manhood. And I always called it this sort of a limbo space where you haven't really figured out who you are yet. And it's a very classic period of time in literature where you can see some of the best characters in literature are written about in that time period of their lives, because it's such a rich area to dig up emotions, basically. You think of the famous Catcher in the Rye and Holden Caulfield, and so these sort of characters are sort of the ones that I've always been drawn to, because they don't know who they are, they haven't figured it out, and the questions that arise from just that give the paintings that same ambiguity, basically, which is something that it's really important to me, to not be super specific about what the character is thinking, how they're feeling. I wanted to leave it to the audience to figure out and I guess choose their own adventure, I guess, like I said before. So it's tricky to describe my relationship to the characters. People always want to ask if it's me, if it's somebody I know, and it never is. To me, they're just catalysts for whatever story I want to unfold for the audience to see, basically. So it's a tough question, but it's, to me, I guess the main question was, what is adult to you? And I don't know, because I still feel a lot of the times that I'm still in that same limbo, even being 42 years old. I don't think we ever really figure out exactly who we are in life sometimes. And I think it's a better place to be sometimes if you're not always questioning it. If I was someone who thought, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I will never change, I would not be making art. I would probably just stop and go fishing, My most recent, I guess you could say, studies have been trying to figure out the next show, basically, or next exhibition. And I haven't shared this with anyone yet, so it's sort of news to me as well, even talking about it out loud. But my most recent sort of interest is the idea of these characters that are basement dwellers. And it kind of goes back to COVID in a sense. I think I'm going to work on a series that involves these characters that live out their lives in their basements. And part of that stems from some of that research I mentioned about digging into deep holes in the internet. And one example being, for example, I did a painting a year and a half ago, maybe, called The Glowfish Enthusiast, which involved a character in his basement and surrounded by all these fish tanks. And that came about as a result of discovering this whole phenomenon called basement fish rooms, which is like what would you call it? A hobby pastime, pretty popular, I'm assuming only in the US, because it's very strange, where people basically just set up fish rooms in their basements, and it's just hundreds and hundreds of fish tanks, and they spend hours a day just maintaining the lives of these fish, and they become like family, and it's just, interesting and bizarre, and also visually really interesting when you kind of find these weird tours of their rooms on YouTube. I watched so many tours of basement fish rooms like a year ago. It was very strange. So coming off of that idea, I wanted to started creating my own versions of these sort of worlds, not necessarily ones that exist like the basement fish rooms, but trying to imagine what other weird things people can be up to in their basements. And I thought that perhaps is a good avenue to go down in terms of my next body of work, which we'll see how that works out. But other than that, that's all I can think of off the top of my head in terms of what I'm focusing on at the moment. So in closing, I basically wanted to say, again, thank you. And my main hope for this exhibition is that people come in and, like I said before, find the stories that I've found interesting and bizarre and weird and uncanny to to be an inspiration for them to go home and Google the weird stories that they saw on the show and continue their own adventure with these ideas. Go look up the life story of the man who sat on the shore of Loch Ness for 40 years now, waiting for the Loch Ness Monster. Go look up the incident of the sip-in from gay history. I mean, there's so many weird, just odd stories that can come out of just simply Googling some of the inspiration that are in these shows, and they can lead you down their own rabbit hole. And I hope that inspires some people to explore the unknown a bit and be a little adventurous, I guess. Thank you.